All right, welcome in everyone. We will start right at the top of the hour. Feel free to let us know where you're joining us from in the chat. Also going to put the link to Forest Factor in the chat if you want to sort of follow along or just check out the tool for yourself. All right, we are right at the top of the hour, excuse me. So let's get started. A few quick housekeeping items. I want you to note that your microphone is muted. If you have questions, we will address them at the end of the presentation, and you can use the Q&A feature or the chat function to ask your question. Additionally, this session is being recorded, and the full recording will be sent to you via email later this week. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Michelle Cain, Director of the Forest Landowners Foundation and Association, and to walk you through Forest Factor, the sustainability tracker, a project that we've poured a lot of heart and strategy into at Forest Landowners. So we developed Forest Factor because we saw a need for clear, credible, and a visual way to show what sustainable forestry actually looks like on the ground. For years, private forest landowners have been managing their land responsibly, improving wildlife habitat, protecting water, and storing carbon, but too often these are out of the broader sustainability conversation. And as we know, that directly impacts market access. So before we dive into the demo, I'll introduce someone who's been instrumental in shaping this effort from the beginning, David Foyle. A little background on David. He is the chair of FLA's Markets Committee, a 2025 Foundation Champion of the Year, and is principal broker at Forest Resource Consultants in Atlanta, Georgia. His guidance in developing this tool, along with other members of the Markets Committee, led it to be the great product it is today. So Dave is going to give you a little bit more background on how the tool was developed and the role it plays in supporting both markets and messaging for private forest landowners. So I'll pass it to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank everyone for joining us. This is a great opportunity to share a little bit more about this tool, Forest Factor, and I'm just going to give some context, why we chose to go down this road, what we're trying to accomplish with it, how it happened, and that sort of thing. And then Michelle will, as she said, go through the actual demo. But we will be able to answer questions at the end. So as we go along, do post those in the chat, and there'll be plenty of time, I think, for Q&A then. So why did we choose to do this? There were several main factors that were beginning to show up 2 or 3 years ago. Some of that was some of the international regulations that were emerging, particularly EUDR, and the challenge for forests around the world to comply with some of those regs was just unreasonable and unrealistic. The second thing is the marketplace seemed to be desiring proof of sustainability beyond certification. Certification has been a great program. A number of landowners at FLA have utilized certification in various types and forms through the years, but that was being challenged a little bit more aggressively by some of the stakeholders and users of downstream forest products and the things that we do derive from the forest. So those things began to be a bit of a threat, if you will, to managing land like we have. And so we brainstormed for a little while, and it started almost 3 years ago. We really hit the ground about 2 years ago in the process with a matching grant from the U.S. Forest Service. So we did get dollar for dollar matching grant. We have a fairly large grant from Norfolk Southern to fund this, and then in kind and other donations from Forest Landowners Foundation. We spent a total of just over $600,000 on this project. It was very collaborative with Forest Landowner Foundation, Forest Landowners Association staff, and then outside stakeholders. The Markets Committee, which is comprised of volunteers at FLA or within the FLA board and membership. We hired a group called Timmons Group to do the actual heavy lifting and programming around this. But the outside stakeholders had a lot of input and say so and contribution in how we should communicate this message and where do we look for the facts and data that would support the good work that we've done as landowners in the United States over the years. So Timmons did a great job with that. One of the most effective and efficient software development processes that I've ever seen. Not that I'm in the software business, but they did a great job helping us with that, kept everything on track. And once the actual effort began, it took a little over a year to build out this program. First half of the year was scoping to figure out what do we want to say and how do we want to say it and where do we want to get the information to prove sustainability across the United States. And then the second half of the year was actually building out the actual tool itself, which I think you'll be impressed when we get there. It is a public-facing tool. It's designed to be used for people and stakeholders that, not even stakeholders, I use that term very loosely, users of forest products, I would say, because a lot of them are not stakeholders, but they like to have opinions. But they can be, say, purchasing entities for Starbucks or McDonald's, purchasing directors and sustainability directors about that do make decisions about where to invest and what type products to use in their various businesses. So at that point, they do become stakeholders for sure because they are the ultimate user facing the retail, buyers out there. So it's designed for them. It's designed to be fairly intuitive. It's designed to be able to answer questions about different regions, locations, and areas. The data itself, and you'll see it really is a map that shows the sustainability and it gives us a score, sustainability score for particular areas of the country. And it uses a hex system, and Michelle will show you that when we get there to define the areas. And these hexes exist across the U.S. and they're about 3 million acres each. Okay, and the data that we chose to use, we started out, and Michelle will show you how this thing works in a little bit. But the data that we chose to use, we did a deep dive with Timmons and some data scientists to determine what's out there, what's readily available, and that has been vetted by the public and is generally, accepted. And so we started out, we found over 70 different data sources. Could be at the state level, region level, or the national level. And we evaluated all of those through the process and wound up with about 12 to 14 actual data sources that we utilized. And those data sources that we utilized, we divided that into compartments or characteristics. And this spider diagram shows kind of how the data is related at a high level. And what you'll see here is forest factor is the green dot in the middle. That's the tool itself. All of these other things feed into that. And you'll see the sort of dark green circles. There are 6 characteristics. Forested acres, forest growth and carbon, forest resiliency, and I'm kind of going around circling clockwise, water quality, wildlife diversity, and community impact and jobs. we felt like all of those factors contributed to answer the question of sustainability. And each of those factors had their own sustainability score in this process. And in that, the is that an orange color? Are the actual ranked metrics that we felt like we wanted to utilize to rank that particular characteristic. And so for forested acres, basically the way that works is we look at over time. I think it was a 10 to 15 year period. I'm not sure exactly the number of years, but it was a period of time whether the forested acres increased or decreased. So did we lose or gain forested acres over time? And the others, I won't go through the detail of all of those, but basically we picked a key metric within each of these various characteristics to rank. And then there's a final step that will do. It's a I can't explain it. The math is above my pay grade, but it's a very sophisticated weighted average of those 6 different characteristics to come up with a sustainability score. Okay, and Michelle will show you how that score works as you go along. There is additional functionality in the tool that you can turn on or off each of those. So if you only want to look at water quality, you can toggle off of everything else, and you can see the water quality score for a particular hex or area of the forest. The gray circles represent additional information that we provide, but we don't use to calculate the score. And so it's a process by which, again, in water quality, the unranked metric is whether or not the state or the predominant state in the hex or the area has BMPs in place. So it's a very simple additional information, is our BMPs being implemented and monitored in those particular states. And then finally, before we leave this, a lot of discussion around timber markets. Should timber markets be a part of the score or should they not? And we decided finally that we would use timber market activity as a separate characteristic that we do measure and report on, but it does not influence the score. What we wanted to score is the forest based on those key characteristics, the 6 that we mentioned, and then we overlay the timber market health on top of the hexes. And when we get there, you'll see that's a toggle on and off up in the right-hand corner. So you see what this shows is the darker areas, which have the higher sustainability scores. Those are the most sustainable areas of forest in the country. There's a direct and high correlation of those areas with healthy markets. So we do know that healthy markets do lead to healthy forests, and this does prove that out for sure. So we were very pleased with the results and the story that this does tell. Since we've been demonstrating this, we've had a number of great questions around how this thing works and how the math works and the underlying data and that sort of thing. But we have not had a single challenge on the validity or accuracy of the information. So it appears that it's being very widely accepted, as a legitimate way to look at sustainability. Where do we go from here? There were a number of things that emerged in the process of developing Forest Factor that were beyond the scope of what we could complete to get this version 1.0 out. And we've got a little list of those that we're holding on to. And we're hoping as we go along that we will either be able to secure some more grant funds or additional donations to continue to make this better and make it a little bit more I won't say user friendly and efficient and provide additional information. One of the things that an example of what I'm talking about is you can only in this version you can only select a single hex. We really wanted to be able to select multiple hexes at a time. So if a particular stakeholder our viewer wanted to look at South Alabama, for example, they would be able to select the 4 or 5 hexes for that section of the country, and it would calculate the sustainability score for multiple hexes at a time. But that was a little bit higher. We just couldn't get there to calculate on the fly, and it'd be an efficient presentation of the information. So there's a number of things that we would like to do in the future. So keep that in mind as you look at this, and we encourage you to think about donating to the foundation to help us continue to improve this tool. So that's sort of the history, context, and why we did this. And I'll be quiet for a few minutes and let Michelle get to the tool itself.
Thanks, David. That was a very good overview of some of the basics of the tool. And before we dive into the Explorer, I'm just going to go back to this main page really quickly and kind of show you what you're looking at here. So this just goes through and explains why, especially if you're reaching someone that's not familiar with forest sustainability and really what that means, because there are a lot of definitions of sustainability. So we wanted to really make sure that anyone coming to this page can come here and understand really what we're doing. So this here goes through all the characteristics that David mentioned, forest land area, forest growth and carbon, all of these are here, and then it kind of explains a bit why we chose them. So that's kind of your main page. And then, of course, we have this section about timber markets and sustainability, which explains that we did intentionally make this a toggle on, toggle off overlay. So you could really visually see the impact of healthy markets on healthy forests. So let's go ahead, go back to the map. Like David mentioned, these are all hexagons that are right around 3 million acres. So we have all of the United States here, aside from Hawaii and Alaska. And each hex represents the sustainability score by the color. So let's just go here real fast. So here you're looking at less sustainable to more sustainable. So the darker this teal, the more sustainable it is, which is great. And then here is that timber market activity from low to high. And you can see that there as well. So those are some basic functions there. Let me click on a hex and really dive in a little bit further. So I'm gonna go, this looks like a nice one here. Let's see, we're in Alabama and Mississippi. So let me show you a little bit. We have a couple different reference layers. So to help you know exactly where you are in the state, you can turn that on here as well. Or we also have U.S. Forest Service regions and watersheds. So those are your overlay layers that you can toggle on and off as well. But I clicked on this hex here, so let's talk a little bit more about this specific hex and what we're looking at. So you can see it has a sustainability score of 7. That is the highest sustainability score that you could get through Forest Factor. It is on a scale of 1 to 7. Let's scroll down here, and it mentions here that's based on all characteristics. And that's because you can actually see down here what each characteristic scores. So right here, we're looking at forest land area, and it's a score of 3 out of 7. And it's showing there is a negative 2.5% change in forest land area. It says calculated over 20 years. For each state, it's a little bit different based on the data, but it's anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And if you want to know specifically for that state, it is in the user guide, which I will show you here in just a bit, but you can find right here. And then this also has the additional information. So these are not ranked. This is the percent of forested land. And here it tells you the total acres, as well as ownership class, federal, state, and private, and then land cover type. So as you can see here, obviously this has a great sustainability score, and we have a lot of forest land. So that makes sense there. So let's switch over to forest growth and carbon. And this had 7 out of 7, which is great. So we have a positive 3.2 tons per acre per year in forest growth, which makes sense as we saw there's a lot of forest land area there. Here's your additional information as well. So you have above ground tree volume, you have total standing carbon, and growth to drain ratio. And as we realize going through this process, most people that aren't involved in forestry don't understand growth to drain ratio. So we did explain here what that is to really make sure that people can understand that a ratio of 1 is representing where growth and harvest is equal. So at a certain point, there's a tipping point where there's too much. So that is why it is not a ranked variable. That is why it is here. Going to move on to wildlife diversity, 6 out of 7. And what is ranked here is species richness. So we have amphibians, mammals, and birds, and that's what we base that off of. There are no additional attributes here. Forest resiliency is insect and disease infestation risk. So this doesn't include wildfire or anything like that. This is just based on this here. But we do have additional information that tells you how many acres have been burned by fire, how many floods, wind, everything that's been affected there as well. We'll switch over to water quality. If you're familiar with forest to faucets, that's where this data came from. So this number is that forest to faucets number. So it's 68 and it's from 0 to 100. So that's the ability for this area to produce clean water. And then like David mentioned, there is BMP monitoring in the prominent state here. We'll move over to community investment in jobs. Now, it says 2 out of 7, which looks not so great, but you have to, let's zoom in a little bit here. Oh, I just clicked off my hex. There we are, I think. I'm zooming in. Okay. And I'm going to toggle this off. So you can see a little bit here. There are some air. I can't tell exactly what city that is. Meridian. Okay. So you'll notice that this sounds not so great. However, it's because it's calculating this compared to jobs across the sector, right? So when you look at this in general, you're still getting $29 million of total wages, but that's only 1.3% of the total annual wages. And this just gives you more information here about Mississippi, employees, and the amount that come in from wood products. So you're thinking forestry, logging, sawmills, things of that nature. David, did you have something to add?
Um, yeah, just around that number, we struggle with that one on the best way to present the economic impact, and what we found as we looked at the data, the hexes that had a little bit more development, a little bit more population, and a little bit more economic diversity as far as jobs and opportunities. Forestry is contributing a little less to that sector because of the other dollars that are contributing to the total wages in that particular hex. So what happens is the rural areas forestry is making a much larger contribution because there's less of those type jobs. So if you go to an area around as Meridian or around Birmingham or around Atlanta, some of those areas, forestry is not as strong a contributor to. It might be more dollars or equal dollars, but it's not in a weighted sense to the general economy of the hex. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I just clicked on this one here because I saw Jacksonville, Florida. And you can see here as well, it's a 2 out of 7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, zoom out a little bit more. So that is some basic functionality. And I'm going to turn this layer back on so we can do a couple different places across the US. So let's hop over here to the Northwest and see what we have going on. Let's see. All right. So here, the sustainability score is 3. So you're looking at that and you're going, okay, why do you think that is? And you come down here and, well, a lot of change in forest land acres. Let's see. Good forest growth and carbon. Wildlife diversity is low there. And I am not familiar with this part of the country. So I live over here. So so this is purely experimental
Right.
at this point, but it does give you, I'm kind of surprised that there are 0 acres burned by fire, but maybe it's just
I
so
think
far away.
there's not much forest in that hex, I suspect,
Yes,
Michelle. Look at
that's
the
exactly.
total. Only 25% of the total area is
Yeah,
forest.
yep.
A lot of water.
A lot of water.
That's Seattle area, I get.
Yep. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at here. And let me go in here a little bit. So this would be my hex. I'm right around Indianapolis, so big metropolitan area. So I just want to go to this community investment and jobs that David was talking about, where it's a 1 out of 7, because most of this hex is metropolitan area. So that makes sense. Same thing here with Atlanta. But if we go over here, nope, that's got Memphis. Let's click on this guy. Okay, see where we are. Alabama and Mississippi. It's a little bit better. So it really depends on the population density of the area, who's working what jobs, that sort of. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's still bringing in a lot of money, but it's just not the dominant field in that area. So scroll out a little bit more here. Did I miss anything, David? Is there anything else you want me to dive into a little bit more?
Probably. I mean, I think you covered the map very well, and the tool itself. As the way you use it.
Yes.
It probably, if you wanted to go to the user guide or
Yep.
you
Let's do
know
that.
some of the explanation that we provide
Mhm.
in that part of the website.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to scroll up. This was a spider diagram from earlier. This is in the user guide. So if you scroll up here, we'll kind of go quickly through the user guide. Table of okay, here we go. So this gives you that summary of what David kind of went through, the characteristics, and exactly what that means. You get to the spider diagram, which shows you all of the ranked metrics. And then it explains a bit how we take all those metrics and come up with the forest factor score. Let's see, get through some of this here. So let's take forest land area for a minute, because that's obviously going to affect all of the other metrics. If you don't have habitat, you don't have wildlife. so
Mm-hmm.
So this gives you a little bit of idea. So here you can see that it was FIA data, so publicly available. We had 20 years worth of data. And then this goes through all of the data source if you want to know a little bit more, and how these metrics were calculated. So let's go down here a little bit. And then I had talked about how not everyone is a 10-year change. This gives you exactly how many years difference it is for each state. So say you're looking at Indiana, you would see that that changes from 1998 to 2021, which is a pretty big data set. But you can come over here and see Alaska, which technically isn't in the map, but there's a much smaller data set to go off of. Let's see. And then it also goes into the non-ranked metrics. So it'll explain how and where we've got forest land area by ownership. That's pretty easy to find. Land cover type is from the National Land Cover Database. use that in a lot of different projects. So that again just shows where that's from. So you can kind of see in all of these here, it gives you a lot of detailed information about what the metric is, where we got the data from, and how we calculated sustainability score for each one. So if you really have some questions and want to deep dive, this really gives you all of that information in here that you can dive into. Is there any specific, let's go down to community investment and jobs just real fast. Try not to scroll too fast for you because nobody enjoys that. Let's see. Of course, it's at the bottom. Okay, here we go. So community investment in jobs. It shows here that we aggregated annual wages generated by forestry, logging, and wood product manufacturing and paper manufacturing industries. So that gives you an idea of what is going into that. And that's based off of Bureau of Labor Statistics, but that's also looking at this against all of the other jobs in the area, which we were showing you. But everything is in here to give you more information about where that came from, including timber market activity, which was really a big part of this project to show that where we have healthy markets, we have healthy, sustainable forests, and that when you're buying US wood, you can feel good about it. You know that it's come from a place where they're replanting, where it's sustainable, and where they're really managing for all of these factors that are shown in here. And that's kind of, here it goes even into all of the reference and database data map layers. It's obviously based in GIS, so that gives you some of that. And just another thing I wanted to point out that we've created that is on our website is this quick start guide. So if you do want to share this tool with someone and they just want to get in and play around, this gives you an idea of how exactly to just go in. And I think it's pretty intuitive, but just in case, we created this where you can go in and check out all of the different factors as well. So,
I'll just one last thing.
yeah,
The hex system, I think, was developed. Was it Google or Uber? Who
one of the
came up?
two.
One of the
Might be,
two. In
yeah.
regards to it's cell phones and location algorithms that they were using, and it's a universal type system, and they're various sizes of hexes. You could go down to, I think, as small as a few hundred acres up to some that are larger than these. We did choose to pick about 3 million acres because, one, we didn't want to go so small. The smaller you go, obviously, the more complex the data and the math is, and the less accurate some of the data that informs those calculations would be. And also, in some cases where they're very large landowners in small hexes, you could create some confidentiality or some ability to know more than you should about the private landowners within that hex. We felt like this was a good size. It's large enough to have good information to make the calculations from that, but it's not so large that you can't relate to it on the ground. Now the hexes do cross state lines. We have some data that is at the state level, and so if it's state level data, it may apply to all the hexes in the whole state. BMPs, for example, it's a yes no. In Georgia, we have BMPs, and so it's a yes no thing. So all the hexes there would have that. But as a hex crosses state lines, they do a weighted average of the acreage and cover types and other data that informs the score. For that hex, and the predominant hex, if the larger area is a state that has BMPs and the smaller area it doesn't, the answer would be yes in that case. So it's a weighted average, and it does take into account the variances in data that do cross state lines occasionally. So we feel pretty good about the methodology. We feel like we've done a good job with the information that we have to tell a story. So I just wanted to add that about the way the hexes work. in that close-up view, you could see being able to select multiple hexes might be a very good tool for someone who's thinking about locating a new facility in North Alabama or South Louisiana kind of thing, to be able to make a comparison fairly quickly. So,
Yeah, and just so you know how this is kind of being used outside of just private forest landowners, um, some procurement teams are going to use it as a risk assessment tool, to say, if we get wood from this area, we know that the risk is low, that there will be a lot of deforestation or conversion. Additionally, we're looking at it with policy stakeholders to reference data about forest carbon and species and markets. And then companies can, just like David said, can use it when looking to put in a new mill or facility and kind of understand what the area is like around there. So really, this is just another way to show them that we don't need to have extra regulations to be sustainable. We're already doing it.
mhm.
So really, we want to kind of use this not just as a map, but kind of a storytelling platform, something that can really help take that story to another level. So we have the story, we know that we tell our story all the time, but this gives the in-depth data to prove what we're saying, that we are creating clean water and clean air and wildlife habitat, and positively influencing rural economies. So that was the overall goal. We feel pretty good about it. And we're very excited to get this tool in more hands. But I think now is a great time to ask any questions. You can do that in the chat. You can do that in Q&A. Or if there's a specific area you kind of want me to explore, just go ahead and let me know. Um, and we'll go from there. I think we have one question here. Okay. The 58 tons per acre, that will be green, merchantable with bark. I'll have to go back to that hex. 58.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that is correct. That if I recall, that the 58 tons per acre was the above ground
Carbon. Yep.
biomass. That's not probably a carbon number. Carbon number is generally less. So in that example on the screen that Michelle is showing, the 56 tons per acre would be the standing biomass above ground. 33 tons, I think that's right. And the 33 tons an acre is the carbon, standing tree carbon. And I think that is above and below ground.
You're very welcome.
Thank
All
you, Jeff.
right. Keep the questions coming. We're happy to. Okay, here's another one. As a forest landowner, how do I use this tool in my operation for planning forest management practices? Great question.
Yes, it is. It is. Good question, Joe. Honestly, I don't think this tool is at such a high level, and the fact that the data is only accurate at a 3 million acre kind of size, I don't think it's going to be that beneficial for an individual landowner. A matter of fact, I had this question after our presentation at the recent national conference. What use is this for a landowner? It really is not designed to be useful at the individual property level. This is designed to tell a story and try to ensure that every landowner in that particular hex or area or in the United States, actually, because we got a great story to tell, um, uh, will have access to good markets over time. Now, I could see it if you were looking at a timber market area and you see very little timber markets and you've inherited a piece of property in an area, um, that the markets are not there. That is certainly going to affect decisions as to whether or not you want to be in that particular market area with that property, or is there a different use? I do think it could inform you to that particular question, but not directly for, prescribing silviculture or management type practices, kind of thing. It's sort of higher level, designed to be at a higher level.
This was developed as part of one of the 3 pillars of the foundation, which is telling the story of private forest landowners. So that was really the goal, was to be able to use this tool to really emphasize that landowners in the US are sustainably harvesting and replanting and creating all of these wonderful benefits. Let's see, just making sure I haven't missed any other questions. Any other thoughts, David, before we end the session?
Not really. I think we've covered it pretty well.
Yep.
No, I'm not that coming to mind right away.
Okay.
Glad to answer any more questions. So now would be the time.
Yep. And you can access this as just forestfactor.org, or you can, of course, access it through the Forest Landowners website, which is forestlandowners.com. So either way, you'll find it right on the main page. So you can access it, share it, explore it a little bit on your own, kind of see what it looks like in your area. And of course, we always welcome any feedback or any additional questions. You can just reach out to me. And I will put my email address in the chat, but it's also on the website as well, in case you don't write it down. Perfect. Okay. So the link and my email are in the chat. So feel free to ask us if any questions come up later, just go ahead and shoot me an email. And with that, David, I really want to thank you for your time, not just today, but on this entire project. It was a lot of work and a lot of great minds in the room coming together to come up with this tool. And I'm just happy I got to pick the colors. So that's my big role in this. But I really do appreciate it, and just feel free, anyone reach out if you have any more questions. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.